So, Jason, I'm not gonna, belabor the point.
Nope.
Have at it. Let's hear a little bit more about what real integrated digital marketing and digital business approaches look like.
Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know the agency I work with and represent, I'll just do a little bit on who we are just to ground us. I've been sitting here today through, I think, 95% of the sessions, trying to gauge what would be most helpful to you and tried to tailor some of the presentation throughout the day. And I think that real-time response is actually what digital is about, but more importantly, I feel like we've talked a lot about different components. And we've spoken about social media, we've spoken about the importance of responsive publicity and some of what it takes to pull off a digital idea. But what I'm going to do is try to talk about it how we do, which is from a holistic brand standpoint and really the integration of it. And as a matter of fact, I think I've worked across markets in Asia, in Europe, primarily in North America. And the good news is everyone's trying to figure it out. It doesn't matter what stage of development your market's in, whether you have the infrastructure or it's evolving, you always have to evolve. So the questions you're asking yourself now will be the same questions you're asking yourself 5 years from now, just slightly more evolved. So I'm here to kind of talk a little bit about what our market's doing and our philosophy as an agency. We, as an agency, are 6 factories. We call ourselves one agency. And I believe our PR blip is that we are the first post-geographic. We have video connections through all the offices, so any client in any part of the world has access to the full agency, and our teams are integrated across. So we don't just do digital, we live digital. We have about 1,000 people worldwide, and our philosophy is born out of a very simple idea. We live to make brands outrageously successful and make ideas that people will talk about. We try to bake in media buzz into every idea we have. And that's really been the crux of a lot of our success. We've worked with a lot of clients here. These are our current clients. Over the years, we've done things with Mini Cooper. We were the agency of record for Burger King for 8 years and did the Subservient Chicken, the first interactive digital experience site, which took a lot of early thinking about coding and what your brand idea was to pull that spectacular off. And over the years, we've been able to build that into more of a philosophy. I'm not going to touch on the obvious. I think we're all here because we're aware that because the rules of engagement have changed, consumers have different expectations, brands are no longer static and need to be part of how we live, and there's a lot of advertising avoidance. And I've only been with Crispin for about a year. I used to work at a lot of big global networks like Ogilvy and JWT. And when I came to Crispin, someone said something to me that I absolutely loved, which is, we're an ad agency that hates advertising. And I felt like, all right, then we're not going to do stuff that's going to be wallpaper. We're going to use digital. We're going to integrate ideas. We're going to think holistically. So we create experiences that people don't avoid but engage in. Our team across all 6 factories is about 400 digital strong. So that's, if you're doing the math, that's about 40% of our entire staff. These are some of the roles that I'm sure you're familiar with. So strategy, which I represent, I co-lead our strategy department, and analytics as a part of that, so we know what we're measuring and why. User experience designers, UX, we're bringing that group into the center of everything we do more and more, and that's very important for all types of businesses. We ask ourselves what our consumer is thinking or feeling at every touch point. We talk about brand ecosystems, which isn't just a cool phrase. It's how do we look at a brand beyond just print or a website. We don't look at it in segments. We look at it holistically. And then technology experts. We try to get as many geeks as we can in our fold. And our head of technology has a question he asks people all the time when he's interviewing them. What have you invented lately? And it's a question that I think is good that you might want to start asking to some people that you're bringing into the fold, because digital and mobile is about invention. It's about people who take an idea and start to craft it and create it so that it is static. It is moving from static, to something that you can engage in. And then we have experts, obviously, in production and mobile. We come up with 100% of our own ideas, and we create about 90% of those. The Subservient Chicken example was something that we actually worked with a partner that was an expert, and we did that. They're called the Barbarian Group. I'm going to share a small case study for Amex Open, and we've done a great program, and we've done it with Digitas and Facebook. So you have to have the right partners when you don't have it in-house, and that's okay. That model evolves based on everything that you need. This is something that I think you're aware of. These are US job post stats of creative technologists. So these are the people that help make an idea something that is a utility that you can engage in. And I always like to say that the world has moved from hunters and gatherers now to developers and users or coders. It's just a whole different way to think about how we produce and how we connect as a society. This is our shameless PR slide, but what I like about it is we were voted Agency of the Decade. I showed up about 5 minutes after that decade was over, so I'm kind of responsible for what our next PR slide is going to be. We were the #1 interactive agency 3 years running, or 3 out of 5, and won a lot of interactive awards at Cannes. So when I sat down before this presentation with our head of UX, I started to talk about where do we come from and where do we think we're going, because I think that might be a helpful philosophy to share with you guys. So I've kind of charted this out with his input. But that first stage when our agency was born and started to cause a little ruckus in the ad industry, it was really about creating culturally disruptive ideas and creative. We did the Truth campaign and was based in Miami when we launched it. I don't know if you're familiar, but basically that was an anti-smoking campaign based on the cultural insight that teenagers needed an enemy. And parents were often the enemy when saying, you don't smoke, it's bad for you. So our entire creative approach, which was an integrated program, was to turn the lens on that and give teenagers a new enemy, to villainize big tobacco. And that was very disruptive. Another idea in that phase was for Mini Cooper when we launched that. Everyone was driving big, luxurious SUVs, and we created a backlash against big with the small fun of a Mini Cooper. So that's kind of our agency philosophy, but then digital started to become more available. People were interacting much more. Broadband was shooting up in the States. So we started to look at ideas that were more digital features. So the Burger King subservient chicken at the beginning of that relationship, Whopper sacrifice at the end, where we actually used Facebook, and we got in trouble for it, to get friends to sacrifice a friend for a free Whopper. So we found ways to engage, and we call these digital features, right? But they're culturally disruptive because at the time, how many Facebook friends do you have that aren't really friends? Hell yeah, I'm going to give one up for a Whopper. So we looked at what is culturally relevant, and we play with it. And that's, again, part of what we do digitally as well as in any other medium. But now, in 2010, what we're starting to talk about from a couple years ago to now is a brand system, not just these little one-hits that you do a program here or there, but if I actually map as a business, as a brand, where is my consumer living? What are the touch points I have with them from at a home, subway, journey to work, mobile in their hands, social networks, scorecards for CRM? How do I start to map that and then make sure my brand idea, my brand philosophy is something that I can interact with them at those different points? And I'll show you a case for Domino's where we looked at their business model and went a little more digital for them. And again, this case for Amex Open, which is the small business card. It's a resource for small business and entrepreneurs. And I've left that next box open because no one knows. I think we're going to make the future, and I think someone said it earlier, there's a lot of entrepreneurial genius kind of bubbling up here in the Caribbean, so I think that's anyone's game, but for now we'll stick to current day. So to me, a brand is something that's both simple as far as an idea and very complex as far as how you push it out into the world. Brands deserve more than ads. As I said, sometimes I don't believe in advertising, even though it's paid my mortgage for 10 years. I believe in something bigger than advertising, what a brand can be and what you can do with it at different touch points. So they require more than just ads to succeed. A brand is an idea, a promise, a relationship, a utility. So if you think of something like Nike Plus, you have the idea of just do it, and then you actually have a tool that helps you go out there and do it in a multi-channel, pumped up adrenaline way with music. A brand is a system, a lifestyle, and an identity. Last night I was drinking Stag. Apparently it's for real men. So I drank it. It's my identity here in Trinidad. A brand is a platform. I love the idea of a brand as a platform. It means that you have an idea that is a runway for so many different things to do with it. And I know money and resources are the immediate reality, but just knowing you have an idea that you can go off and execute a real community or a utility on mobile or a digital stunt in the middle of an airport or something that your idea has a lot of legs and digital allows you to fill that out over time is important. And I think you need to start with the brand idea, not just a product idea, not just a tagline. Really understand what your brand's about, because it makes all these digital conversations a lot more choiceful. It's not what do I have to do with Twitter. If you have a brand idea, you might actually know if you need to use Twitter or not, because you've defined who you are, and therefore you're going to know how you're going to communicate better. So to me, a brand is boundless. I don't think of it, again, in forms of media. I think of it as an idea that hasn't taken shape in every other form yet. So to that point, I say that your brand plus digital equals no walls and no dead ends. And that's our philosophy now when I say brand system. How do I, if I'm a retailer, create no dead ends? So if you shop in my store, you get something on the receipt that connects you to a CRM loyalty program or connects you to a website. Or if you buy a football in my store, there's an app that actually has how you throw the perfect spiral. Or I'm sorry, you do a different kind of football. But whatever it is, that you don't just put money into a marketing program that leaves an impression, but that helps people travel through your brand ecosystem. And again, as I said, the new world that we live in has no walls. So we may delineate between budget, we may delineate between resources. Consumers really don't delineate between these things. There's lines there, but there's really no walls. And I think that the more you think of organizing that around each user, so we do a persona. We go, who is our target? For example, we do a clothing retailer in the States. We defined one persona, one archetype. And then what we did is we said, what modes of shopping does she have? Because not everyone is the same person. And we found out that there are price-sensitive shoppers, entertainment shoppers, and in-a-hurry shoppers. We're able to create different content at different touch points in the store or online for different modes of shopping. So I think, again, knowing your brand idea has room and legs, understanding your audience, and then starting to think about what they need at each stage of your purchase process. It can be very basic, it can be very complex, but if you aren't having those conversations, it's time that you start doing that, because it starts to help answer a lot of the questions I think we're coming up today on what's right and how do we manage certain environments. The ultimate in brand preference is that relationship. So the emotional connection is what we do in advertising. If people feel really good about our brands, they're going to love them. There's going to be a premium. They're going to pay more. But if there's another brand that they can do more with, you're going to start to lose territory. So you need those two kind of dual components. This is kind of an eye chart. I'll explain it. There's a study that covers 30 categories done by my former agency. And what they do is they look at the relationship of time you spend with a brand equated to the amount of bonding you have with that brand. And obviously, it's almost a one-to-one ratio. I can't laser chart it, but you'll see towards the top right. It gets to a point where the more engagement you create, the more bonded I am with your brand. The more time I spend with Harley, the more I'm going to love it. The more time I spend with Coca-Cola, the more loyal I'm going to be. And so consumers who spend that time correlate to higher value. And so that's when I think about digital and mobile, not as I just need to be where my consumers are, but how do I get them to just play with me a little bit more as a brand? Because then you start to make that relationship more meaningful. Again, our marketplace is rapidly evolving, and it's been shaped by a decade of immense change and competition. And that's going to keep going, and those cycles are going to continue to go and grow. Let's see. I think we're stuck. Okay. I'm going to touch on these lightly, and I'm sure we can circulate the presentation after. But I call this Commerce 2.0. If you think back just 10 years and what's changed from technology trends to consumer expectations because of those trends, the economic ethos, we've gone from boom to recession globally, and then also competitive proliferation in retail and commerce in a lot of our categories. there's a lot of different drivers that are changing how people shop and behave. I feel like this is a different presentation. This is probably a case study that you guys are very familiar with, so I'm not going to highlight too much of this, but there are key drivers that our consumers that we look at. Yes, you can look at demographics and say younger consumers are more digital, but it's changing from top to bottom across demography. And in fact, multi-channel consumers are worth a lot more than consumers who are interacting with your brand through one or two mediums. So here are some stats that are always helpful, but 82% spend more if they're multi-channel, if you're hitting them on web, if you have them in CRM, if they've seen your TV. And 8 out of 10 consumers are purchasing online. So there's just a lot more energy there, and even though these are kind of more North American and some global stats, I know that they echo some truths here. But back to integration, for us, what's very important, when I use the term ecosystem, this is the type of stuff I see in my head. So we have a consumer at the center, and we have a brand that isn't just an idea, but an idea activated. So mobile, print, events, broadcast, out of home, thinking about what utilities we have both mobily and on the desktop. They could be apps, information, a blog of an expert, and then your retail space. And how do you ensure that they're connected? And oftentimes we get really focused on what are we doing with Facebook, or what are we doing over here, that we forget that we need to think of hubs and we need to think about the consumer journey throughout these. So retailers that are leading and brands that are leading forward right now in this space versus brands that failed. And we found kind of these 5 buckets of things that they're doing well. And these aren't ad hoc nice to haves. These are, you're trying to do as many of these as possible. One is shifting from a sales mentality to a service mentality. What does my brand do for people? What is my edge? We did this for Best Buy a few years ago when we activated all of their employees. We call them blue shirts. And the ones that were super geeky, we put them on Twitter. And so that became 12th Force. And it was a way to take their competitive advantage, put it outside the walls of their stores to bring people in. And it's a very hard category to be in right now, and they're still standing while their biggest competitor, Circuit City, is gone. Creating value through branded environments and experiences. So again, stuff that people want to spend time with. Let's have fun with this. I see a lot of stuff in the marketplace that is put out there because it feels right for the brand, but it wasn't built from the consumer perspective. Ask yourself why you would want to spend time with it. Integrating with consumers' lives instead of waiting for them to come to you. That's the ecosystem idea again. Where are the spaces and places they enjoy? Where are they? Who are they? And how do you reach them? Actively building a loyalty program. Are you collecting data? Are you collecting information on who's buying, what they're buying, and when they're buying? Because that information is gold. You can work on integration. You're also going to work on measurement. You want to know who they are, where they are, what they're buying. You can create content. You can create a relationship with them that way. And the last one is simplified shopping, streamlining an enterprise. And a lot of big box retailers from Macy's to all the ones in the US, right now they're trying to make it so simple because you can't be in every department, every store, every city all the time, but make that enterprise more flexible so your consumers can find what they want and tailor things to themselves. So these are just some of those questions that are meant to put the user at the center, so that user experience. What is their mode of shopping? What's your consumer getting out of this? What is the value exchange? Why would you're worried about creating a digital experience, worry about what experience they want to spend time with. Why would they care, or why would they share this? And I think someone said that earlier this morning, I think Jen. Would they visit multiple times? Once you've created something, do you have a mechanism to keep them coming back? An incentive, fresh content, a blogger, a new voice, a new perspective? Do you have that going on for your brand? And how does this interaction link to deeper experiences and deeper reward? So that idea of no walls. If you create something and you don't have a feedback loop or another channel or a way for them to continue engaging, it's like me walking up to you saying hi and just standing there. That conversation isn't going to go very far. Another thing that I'm not sure I heard today, and it's a very common framework, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, is when we talk about integration, there's paid media. I'm producing something, and I'm paying to have it on a network, I'm paying to have it syndicated, paying to have it in Times Square, right? But there's all this other stuff on the other side that we need to consider. So participation, earned media. With those ideas, and this is why we talk at Crispin a lot about ideas that have talk value, when you put it out into the world, into society, who's going to talk about it? What's your PR spin? How do you manage that then in social media? And some people have spoken about that today. And are you creating content, or are you empowering consumers to create content? All of that stuff is earned media. It's impressions around your brand idea. And oftentimes, part of the battle for people in my industry is, how do you get clients to understand that if the idea is good enough, it kickstarts a lot of that stuff on the right, but you still have to think it through. Where am I injecting fresh content? What is the PR spin? How do we create momentum? And one of the things that we build is a momentum map. We map from the launch of our paid media to different stunts or different ideas and talk about when those hit, because we're not just advertising, we're creating a conversation. We got to keep putting stuff out there that stimulates that conversation. So again, at the basis of our philosophy, we leverage cultural tension to start those conversations about product truths. What is an uncomfortable truth? What is something that is so big that people have to talk about it? And how do you use that to sell everything from pizza to Best Buy to cars to shoes? You'd be amazed. People, again, aren't that interested in advertising, but if your brand's hitting a cultural nerve, people will start to talk about it, and you can start to build programs around it. So I'm going to touch on kind of 3 basic steps that are, I guess, easier to say and harder to do, and across 2 cases, Domino's Pizza and Amex. The way this flows out is we look for a cultural challenging truth. So for the Domino's example, which I'll get into, people didn't like our pizza. So does that mean more advertising, or does that mean the right advertising that says, you're right, maybe our pizza isn't as good as it could be? And would people talk about that? And there in that brand idea is where we craft that. And then the boundless expression. Once you have a brand idea that you know is hitting a cultural nerve, then you can start to feel where it expands into different elements, into different aspects of society. So Domino's Pizza, this is a tension that we had to address in the marketplace. I know exactly what to expect from Domino's: mediocre pizza delivered fast. Well, that's great in one way, that they know we deliver fast, but in all the options and all the world for food and pizza, Domino's had a big problem. So what I'm going to do is we're going to play you about 2 minutes of a setup, just because I want to make sure everyone's aware of this cultural tension and what the business challenge was. And then I'll show you how we looked at their business model and started to take the idea of transparency and bring it into their online ordering. We needed to unleash the ruthless truth to get people to accept what was going to be new. And so we did that with transparency, and the best way to be transparent was that those Twitter feeds, those documentaries, we weren't paying for media time on those aspects. Those things were all propagated by consumers. They were things that allowed us to, bring them closer to the change and show that we were listening. And I think that's a great kind of macro benefit to digital. So the brand idea was that we reinvented ourselves, coined the pizza turnaround. And from there, what we did is, one of the issues when you order a pizza, and I've worked on Domino's for years before, is that when you order the pizza, your brand experience is very high, and then you wait for it. And I think this is true of any delivery, right? So you're sitting there, and your affinity for the brand kind of gets, and then the pizza gets there, and it's good. It's been reinvented. So what we talked to them about was, a digital model of you can order online, but it feels like it's just an order going into the void. How do we show, with this new brand idea, that you can actually see your pizza, you can comment on it, and create a feedback loop? And that's an important thing if you're in a turnaround situation. So all of our digital ideas are integrated and come out of that honest, oh yes, we did brand idea. So if you can show the second video, I'll show you the pizza tracker, which again takes the idea of transparency and new pizza and responsibility into the ordering process.
Domino's wanted to increase customer feedback while building on their message of
That last point is very important. You do something spectacular in digital, but because it's digital, it doesn't matter where people are, and you can feed them through that experience, which is what we did right there with Times Square. I have another case, but I'm only going to touch on very quickly because we can talk about it through the Q&A potentially, which was the Amex case. My monitor's not here, so I'm going to just crane my head around a little bit. Again, you have to think of your brand idea as an ecosystem, not just a tagline. And we did a lot with Domino's to blow that out. Again, no walls with the idea. Since I can't see it, I'm going to just come down. So the final slides, I'll actually kind of skip Amex because we can talk about that. I just want to leave you guys with a few ideas. So for Domino's, again, we believe that if you're not seen as doing something, people will think you're doing nothing. With digital, you can do things that are so widespread that you can get much more awareness, much more interactivity as if you do something like a momentum map. If you really plan out your activities, when they launch, when you hit. So again, a wild success for Domino's. I'm going to skip over Amex for sake of time, and I'll leave you guys, because you can get this presentation, I'm sure, after. I'll leave you guys with just a few high-level ideas. One, define a challenge. As we like to say, a cultural challenge is bigger and better. So if you're in a category fight or a product fight, chances are you're punching at an equal weight. But if you can find a bigger truth to exploit, that will always help you and serve you best. Craft a disruptive idea out of that. Map the brand and user ecosystem. We use the word integration a lot. I don't believe you can use it correctly unless you've mapped what the brand and user ecosystem is, because then you know what you're integrating. You know where your holes are, or you know how to make the most of what you have. And last, find creative technology partners, geeks, engineers, coders, go to grad schools. As an agency or marketing people or clients, we shouldn't be just thinking about the old model of copywriter and art director, because they can't build the apps. They can't figure out how to link a retail store to a consumer to Times Square and execute an idea like that. So you need to bring those people into the fold.